welcome back. Big shout out to Willie D, man. I'm getting a lot of compliments on his really great theme music for the Vintage Stories podcast. Today on the episode, we have Jenny Dobson, great old friend, probably my biggest mentor in winemaking, and somebody who always has an interesting point of view. Her passion and experience just sort of oozes through the sound waves on this one. I hope you guys enjoy it. But I did want to mention to start off that we are launching a wine club, a real wine club, not one of these ones that sign up and we'll send you a few emails and might give you a discount or let you know about something. A real wine club. You sign up. There's going to be sort of two versions of it. One in the U.S. where you get a couple cases a year. Actually 2 sets of 15 bottles delivered to all 50 states in the U.S., which is a goddamn miracle if you know anything about wine shipping in America. So we're really excited to be offering that soon. You will be getting not only a discount, but a look at some of these reserve wines that we've held off and held in the library stock, new releases as well. Some stuff, for instance, in the U.S. that I never released in the States, like the Amplified Red, just because, timing and all these kind of little things that work out in the wine business world. And then the New Zealand version, which we're going to have a couple options where you can do like 3 bottles every 3 months, or you can do 6 bottles every 3 months. So maybe by the time some of you guys listen to this, it'll be up there. In the meantime, just go to decimalwines.com, use the promo code DBPodcast, get 10% off your first order. So that's pretty good. But today, the podcast, we are still amidst this Giblet Gravels conversation. We might get one more interview out of it. I've sort of used it to my advantage to talk to some of the most interesting winemakers and viticulturists Hawke's Bay has to offer, because they do all seem to have some connection to this unique appellation. So go to the Giblet Gravels website, gibletgravels.com, click on About, read about what I'm talking about, why it's such a special little plot of soil, that former riverbed that is just really young former riverbed. And then also go to their shop that they have on there and check out the AVS Annual Vintage Selection. There's some really just an incredible grouping of producers and wines that you won't be able to find anywhere else put together like that, all from one vintage. Sort of a great gift as well if you're looking to surprise somebody who would be after a unique collection like this. It's blended reds and Syrah. It's pretty awesome, and who knows, maybe one day Decibel will make an annual vintage selection. I am now, as of 2016, officially in the Giblet Gravels, even though I was working with Giblet Gravels fruit for many years before that. I've sort of made the leap and joined them in their great association. So hopefully one day, but just like all this stuff with wine writers and magazines, I don't tend to enter many shows or awards. Sometimes it's a bit of fun to go into competition with your buddies, but that's not normally what I do. I do like wine writers. I do read wine writers. I think you can, get used to their palate and maybe trust them for if you like what they write about, you like what wines they score high or write, metal or whatever they want to call it. Maybe it's good to have a trusted source out there. And then obviously just to learn about regions and things like that. So people like to knock Robert Parker. He certainly changed the game in the old world, and definitely in California and some places in the other parts of the New World as well, for these big giant bomb wines that are obviously impressive, but it's a style. And if you like that style, you trust Parker. When he was reviewing all these wines, he's only doing a small bit now. He's got quite an elaborate team and a team of people that are really different these days and have different style palettes than he does. So, but I only mention this because I just got some great news that we had made the editor's choice for Wine Enthusiast magazine, and it's great. It's great to have your Pinot recognized with some of the best ones out there. But you can't be recognized unless you send your wine in, and so it's a lot. Some of it's luck, some of it is opportunity. So I want to thank, there's a bunch of people who wrote some really nice things on, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram in response to that. So that was really cool. And hopefully this whole thing's heading in the right direction. So I really appreciate it, guys. So that's all I got to say as an intro. That being said, it all comes back to the people tasting the wine. And that's kind of what Jenny and I first start to talk about. So here we go with Jenny Dobson. So you were saying you're doing some wine courses now.
Wine courses. I think really important to share the passion about
Definitely.
wine. And the more people know about wine, the better they enjoy it as well.
Well, I think that's how I met you, was I got sort of sucked into the vortex at Tiawa. I was like, hey, what are you doing? Come back here, So, and then it's continued on from there. But to Chinese folks, so you said you're
Chinese, yes.
Yeah.
And so a little bit of a challenge in the courses are translated. So a bit of a challenge for me to be concise in short bursts.
Yeah.
So that it can be accurately translated. I find I'm still getting used to the fact that the feedback isn't immediate. It has to be translated as well.
Yeah.
But been absolutely delighted with the first one. Very receptive people and just loving having the knowledge.
And visual aids and smell aids.
Visual age, yes. I think it's wonderful that people can see what they're smelling. So I've got half a dozen typically found in white wine aromas or red wine aromas. So there's a little glass with black currants in it. And especially for people who are working in a different language, to see the black currant and smell it. And you don't find exactly the same smell in wine, but you can see hints of it. And to have some thyme and some cinnamon and some vanilla and some lemon peel and passion fruit. Visual, very important. And doing wine courses at the winery, you can taste from barrel. You can see the pieces of equipment that people talk about, the destemmer crusher. You can walk into the vineyard, see how the vines grow. So to do wine courses at a vineyard in a winery just are the added benefit.
I think that stage of the game is like so important, because I know for me, everybody says, when's your wine epiphany? Well, it was probably a bunch of them. And definitely one of them was when I was in a class and they handed me fresh cut grass and I smelled Sauvignon Blanc, and I went, and these things started connecting in your brain. And you need that foundation, because so many people are they think like you're full of shit. They're just like, do you really smell that in there? Why do they say there's that in there?
Yeah.
And then when it starts happening, they go, oh yeah, and
it's just it's the magic of wine. It's the beauty of wine when you smell and you swirl the glass and you smell again and go, there's something else. But I didn't quite get it. I'm going to smell again. And that is what we want people to enjoy about wines. The other thing that I did in this last course, which again, I was delighted how some of the people just really took it on board. We were tasting a lot of red wines, and tannin in red wine is such an important part of red wine. But tannin, the taste of tannin is really the feel of tannin. So I gave everybody about a dozen different materials for them to feel while they were tasting wine. And one of the people on the course was totally into it. He was feeling with his fingers, he was tasting in his mouth, and he worked out that this wine felt like this, which was a bit of Hessian. And he was really right, because it was a young wine and the tannins still had some grip to them. And then the older wine was like the piece of satin. And for him, that was a light bulb moment.
Yeah.
So if you can help people enjoy wines, that's what the whole aim
The education,
education's about.
Yeah. So you've added now your fifth, sixth job to your resume at the current moment because you weren't busy enough.
Yes, it's but education is, in some ways, it's giving back to the industry that I've worked in for a long time, and I enjoy it. I enjoy sharing the knowledge, and it's just so good for wine as a whole, but for Hawke's Bay. So we start the course with talking about New Zealand, where New Zealand fits into the world of wine, and then Hawke's Bay. And we've got a lot of history about Hawke's Bay. And then we get into the various regions of Hawke's Bay. It's all part of the knowledge. It's the story.
I think we were due to sit down and chat again, especially as I start the sort of 2.0 of this podcast. We sat down a while ago and kind of went through your whole story, so I hope people go back and listen to that. And don't mind the throat lozenge in my mouth if I'm mumbling a little bit.
It's winter.
Yeah. But, when I had this opportunity, that's okay.
That's all right.
That's
Get
all right.
rid of that one.
When I had this opportunity to do a little series on the Giblet Gravels, I thought back to, I think it was maybe last year's annual vintage selection, and it was really funny because it was like more than half of the wines you had your finger on, So just to start out with folks, winemaker at William Murdoch on organic production on the Giblet Gravels, consultant winemaker at Unison Vineyard, red winemaker at Sacred Hill. Under that, you are Squawking Magpie as well, working with Gavin on that, who I really hope to sit down with and chat. He's been a bit busy running around, but he's got some of the history of the Giblet Gravels that he's been a part of. Did I miss anything?
No, I think that's about it at the moment.
So that was, I thought, well, and then formally Tiawa. I know you a long time ago you were at Sacred Hill before, but is there any other
in New Zealand? That's about it.
So a big part of this series is talking about that appellation, or mini series, I should say, and who better than somebody who's worked it from so many different parts. So that was one of the things I wanted to talk about today. Was a lot of people, if you've listened to the previous 5 episodes, I guess, they would know a little more about the history, a little more about the terroir. But one of the things I thought I'd ask you about is the different areas of it and what you see and the differences and site selection and everything.
I started working in Hawke's Bay in 1996, and the sort of planting of the Gimlet Gravels began about 92, a little bit more, 93, 94, 95. Even in 96, there were large tracts of the Gimlet Gravels that weren't planted. The plantings increased 97, 98, and
was it scattered or was it kind of spread?
It was scattered.
Didn't spread out from the road or anything like that.
No.
Yeah.
And so at that time, there wasn't any Gimlet Gravels Association, but I think it probably started between Bruce Halliwell, Anna Barbara, and myself. Because we'd come from a European background, we said there's something quite special about the wines from this area. These soils make these wines really special. So we had a dinner with Steve Smith, and that's where the Gimlet Gravels all started from. From there, Steve took over and drove the thing with John Hancock, Kate Radburn in the beginning, and I think the recognition of those very special soils and the little microclimate that goes with them led to the forming of the Gimlet Gravels. And we did our first, it was 2010. No, 2000. That was the first...
vintage of
that was when we did a launch of the Gimlet Gravels, 2000. So from there, I've in fact, in the intervening years, worked with a lot of different vineyards within the Gimlet Gravels. And what I see is that, yes, there's a Gimlet Gravels character. And that's to do with the fragrance, the spice, and the tannin makeup, or the tannin structure of the wines from the Gimlet Gravels. It sets them apart from the Red Triangle, from the Murray Kakaho reds, from the reds that are grown by the sea out at Esk Valley. They've all got their own individual character. However, within the Gimlet Gravels, we overlay the vineyards on that Gimlet Gravels character. So depending where the vineyards are, because these vineyards, their soil is made up of riverbeds. We've got gravels, we've got sand, and we've got silt. So the proportion of gravels, sand, and silt make each vineyard individual. And then, even within the Gimlet Gravels, we have microclimates. We've got Roy's Hill that sits up there. We've got the Narororo River at one far end. The vineyards that I see that are under the lee of Roy's Hill are more sheltered, more protected, probably, although I've got no weather data to back this up, I'm just wondering if they're slightly warmer. Then you've got...
Just kind of sit, you think the heat sits in there a little bit? It
sits in there. It's a little bit more sheltered. Then there's a cool breeze blows around the back of Roy's Hill. And that will it blows over the back of the Te Awa vineyards down to the William Murdoch vineyards. And so...
Comes through here, actually.
Comes through, yep, you'd get it as well.
Yeah.
There's that little breeze, and it rustles the wind, it rustles the leaves in the summer. It just tempers a little bit of the heat that is trapped under Roy's Hill. I think the road has an influence as well. It's a little bit warmer closer to the road than further away. Now, whether that's the road, the tarmac, or whether it's just protection from Roy's Hill and not getting this cooler breeze. So within the Gimlet Gravels, we have individual vineyard signatures. With some of the vineyards that I work with, because I harp back to my Bordeaux roots, I see some of those warmer vineyards up by Roy's Hill. To me, they're a little bit more plush. I give them a Saint Julien type of character. The ones by the road, again, this is perhaps an individual vineyard, but if I look at Unison, it's more like a Santa Steph. It's got structural tannins. Now, whether that's also affected by the fact that they're close planted vines, but they have a depth and a strength of tannin that I don't see in the plushness of the vineyards underneath Roy's Hill. And then if you go to the other end, so the one that gets this cooler breeze, they're more like Margaux because they've got fragrance and aromatics. And they're very fine and elegant, so they don't have the depth or richness of the vineyards underneath Roy's Hill or the structure of the ones by the road. So I find that fascinating, and that's why even though I'm making wines from different from the gimlet gravels, they're all different because the base material, the raw material, the vineyards are different. And then overlaid on that, because terroir isn't just stones and isn't just soil and climate, there's the human influence on it. So how the vines are planted, how they're tended, all those things.
How old they are. Yeah.
How old. It's all the human influence.
Because where would you put William Murdoch in that? Because, we've made some Malbec out of there, and one of the comments I always get out of there is, and I see it in the Syrahs as well, is, whoa, this wine's dusty, and this is...
There's an earthiness that comes from the William Murdoch vineyard, that reminds me of Bordeaux. Bordeaux, we talk about the earthiness of Bordeaux, where we'll talk about bright fruit from New World wines. Now, the earthiness in William Murdoch isn't the same as Bordeaux, but it does have a dusty, earthy character that you don't find in some of the other Gimlet Gravels vineyards. Now, whether that's because the vineyard is farmed organically, could be. Whether it's just that, but I think it's probably a combination of the soils, which are very gravelly. There's not a lot of silts through the William Murdoch vineyards. You've got that cool breeze. The canopy is very different, probably because the fact that it's farmed organically, there's a lot of competition for the vines. The canopy's very small, it's very open. You do get this rustling of the breeze through the leaves. All those add together to give us a very distinctive vineyard character.
That's for sure, yeah. And then, what have you seen? One of the things interesting about your career is that you started, I guess this is pre-Tiawa or maybe a vintage or two at Sacred Hill, and then because I've seen some old photos of you when the winery was being built, and then to now. I mean, what have you seen? First of all, they probably didn't have Gimlet Gravels vineyards back then.
Well, they weren't Gimlet Gravels vineyards, but the Tiawa vineyards were in the Gimlet Gravels. Sacred Hill didn't in 96, when I was at Sacred Hill, they didn't have vineyards in the Gimlet Gravels. There weren't a lot of vineyards in the Gimlet Gravels then. Yeah. So the Sacred Hill vineyard was planted in Squawking Magpie in 2002. So very early.
Oh, but I suppose I'm just thinking of asking about vine age, but I suppose having known Bruce and Barbara, you would know that vineyard from the wines that were coming out when they were first doing it to now.
So their vineyard was planted 94, 95. They made some wines in 96. Their 97s sort of shot to fame. And 98, of course, was a pretty smart vintage for Hawke's Bay. But that was very early days for Gimlet Gravels. The vines were only 5 years old. So I think one of the things that I see with the Gimlet Gravels now is the consistency. We have had some brilliant vintages, but the consistency of the quality coming through the Gimlet Gravels. And of course, those vines now, even the ones that were planted in the 2000s, they're all over 2 years old now, 10 years old now. They're which is still relatively young for vines, but they're
hitting their stride.
Vine age. They're coming into their own, and so they're finding their natural balance. And I think we'll just keep seeing better and better wines out of the Gimlet Gravels.
Yeah, I think this past vintage was sort of a testament to what I've seen from what I remembered being at Unison when I worked with you there, that those 11 and 12 vintages are some of the... I'm very proud of being a part of making those wines because tough vintages, but they were clearly better than so many other regions in Hawke's Bay.
Exactly. And, those vines at Unison, planted in 94, they're 20 plus years old.
They've seen it.
And look, I tell you what, they're in very good shape. We're just actually doing some replacement of the cordons in that front block by the road. So it's going to have new wood going up to the wire, but the roots, and that's really what counts, those roots have been there since 94. They're well established. They're not at the mercy of those late season rains. They don't have lots of little feeder roots up at the top of the soils. They're going right down, 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 down. So even we had a very, very, very dry summer. That's the thing about the 2017 vintage. It wasn't, yes, we had lots of rain at vintage, but we had an amazingly
it was great.
good,
it shows in the wines.
Dry summer. So even, for me, it's the driest we've had since 98 in January. At the Unison Vineyard, they were only watering every second day, and then quite only a little bit, because those roots were down. They weren't needing the constant watering, despite it being incredibly dry. So
and
vine
windy.
age, yes,
so windy this summer.
So vine age is still coming in the Gimlet Gravels, which is going to be fun.
Keeps going. Put my headphones on just to make sure it's all sounding just lovely.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So what else is going on? I also wanted to talk to you about your Fiano project.
Fiano. Well, Fiano is a Italian grape variety, and it's grown. Its home is on the slopes of Mount Vesuvius, so down by Naples. Grown in, of course, much warmer climate than Hawke's Bay. It's also grown quite a lot in Sicily. Very old grape variety, thought to be the grape variety that was used for Roman wines, Vin Appium. And
you have to do a release party like a Fellini film or something.
Awesome. Could be fun.
Yes.
So Fiano.
Pass that one by the council, though. You know.
You offering your house
yeah.
for the
Sure.
party?
We have an Italian here, you know.
Yes, exactly. Resident Italian. We could just go and keep it all in the right vein.
That's right.
So Fiano, white grape variety, and very little planted in New Zealand at the moment. A little bit in Gisborne that I know of, but there's a planting along Natarawa Road, which is the very first planting in New Zealand, and it was planted in 2000.
Oh, I didn't realize it was that
old.
2010.
2010, sorry. 2010. Got a decade out. 2010.
The years go quick.
Yeah. They do. And the very first one was we made it in 2013. I read about it. I tasted Fianos, but it was my first play with Fiano, and I was just delighted. It's an amazing grape variety in that it has aromatics that you don't find in our standard New Zealand grape varieties. It's not like Sauvignon Blanc or Chardonnay. It has apples in it, sometimes red, sometimes green. It's got apricots, it's got white flowers, it's got a little bit of citrus. So aromatically, it's interesting. I'm now seeing, as it ages, you get a hazelnut character, which is really awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I love Italian whites. They're probably, I don't know, they continue to fascinate me. Some of my favorite wines, if not my favorite wines in the world. And I hope it's a compliment to that when I tasted your Fiano, that there was a little bit of that there. I don't know if it was the hazelnut or it's like a tea leaf kind of thing going on there. There's this. It's not a green thing because it's a ripe thing in the Italian wines that I get, but I've asked around about it, and some people think, oh, maybe it's a little vine stress or something like that, but it almost goes across. Yeah, it goes across. Not those vines, but I'm saying some of the Italian. It almost goes across a lot of varietals as well. I mean, maybe not, some cheap Pinot Grigio or something like that, but a lot of stuff from the north and definitely into Tuscany, the Vernaccia wine, things like that. That there's just this hint of herbs in there, but it's more
Yes,
like a tea
it
leaf
is.
herb or
Yep,
something.
it's a
you know?
dried herb.
Yeah.
So I find the Fiano fascinating aromatically, but in the mouth, it's got a textural richness and a boldness. It's a powerful white, and yet it's refreshing. And I think that's growing Fiano in our climate, which isn't as warm as Naples. It maintains its acidity. It's got very thick skins.
That helps.
So this is a white that we pick late April. So way after all other whites, bar perhaps Albarino, have been picked. It's not that susceptible to botrytis because it's got thick skins. So part of the thick skin, you do get a bit of phenolics, a little bit of tannin from the skin, which again balances the richness of the wine, keeps it fresh. So great variety. Probably for a grower, not that attractive in that the yields are relatively low because they're quite open bunches. So the weight per bunch isn't so good.
Or doesn't add up.
It doesn't add up. And then because you've got these thick skins, your juice yield is quite low. But for a grower maker, awesome grape variety.
Yeah.
And so the planting at Bushhawk Vineyard is planted on pumice soils, so volcanic soils, which Mount Vesuvius, volcanic soils,
Sicily,
it's feeling at home.
Yeah.
It's a grape variety that is quite vigorous, so it's challenging in the vineyard to keep it open, but very rewarding as well. So
yeah, I don't know, this just drifted into my head, but you were mentioning that Bushhawk site, and I know we're talking about the Giblet Gravels, and then I live on a completely different kind of site here, and I just start thinking about all the different great sites around here in the Triangle, and they're all. That almost slipped my mind, and I've as you know, I've had a couple different friends who've lived in that house right on the Bushhawk Vineyard or on the second level, and you stand up there and you go, "Well, this is completely different than," and you don't realize where the sun is until you're actually on the vineyard. You think, "Oh, that's over there," and it's not facing the right direction, but yeah, it's just exposed there, I think, and then even across the street where I used to live on the Bridge Pa Vineyard, that I always felt was like a little heavier, and their Syrahs can be a little bigger from that one there. So it's just, I just feel like it's such early days here.
And it is a bit of a mindset. It's a bit of philosophy. It depends on the winemaker who may be dictated or guided by the company that they work for. You can express the terroir, or you can dumb the terroir down and make a global wine. So if we go back to the Gimlet Gravels, with the tannic structured unison wines, we could, with manipulation in the winery, make them a little bit more plush, but then they wouldn't be true to the vineyard.
Yeah, well, they're unique wines.
So we've got all these different sites within Hawke's Bay with different soils, with different climates, with different grape varieties. We could make individual wines from them, which you have to get out and hand sell and tell their story. Or we can dumb down the vineyard character and make them global wines that tick a lot of boxes, but then they're the same as lots of other wines. And what is going to make them distinctive? Their price, or their low price. But if you go down the road to make an individual wine, you also have to tell the story. Yeah, hence what you're doing.
Yeah, it seems to be where, I don't know, that's certainly where I've had any success, or the only future I have. I'm not going to compete with the Delegates of the world and stuff like that, who are making commercial wines that go all over the world, and they certainly have their fair share of vineyards around.
And equally as challenging for a winemaker
To make
a wine of consistency and of good quality every vintage.
Yeah, and
There's a real challenge and a real art to that. It's different to making the best wine possible that reflects the soil and the vintage.
And I find that even a vintage variability, all that stuff is good for me, because we're selling in restaurants, you want them to re-up on the next vintage and say, well, this has happened this year, and I'm out there selling it. And so are, like Unison's a great example, though they have the same vineyard every year, there's a lot of difference between vintage there and different wines, and the blends are different and things like that. So, it's definitely harder in certain ways to get out and sell that. But I also think that's where, the market or where people are headed. And it's certainly where I think 90% of the New Zealand productions sort of need to be, because you're just racing to the bottom otherwise. We're never going to compete with South America and even France and places that just do amazing amounts of wine. Maybe some Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc can do that, but the rest of us, there's just no way.
Diversity. People like to be wowed by what's in the glass, and there'll be occasions where they'll just swig down what's there because it's washing down the food and they're talking and whatever, and so that's a wine for that occasion. But I think people do enjoy the diversity in wine. They want a glass of wine, and they want it to be different to the one the night before or the week before or whatever. And so this is where your individual character, and certainly for people coming into the region, they don't want to go from winery to winery, cellar door to cellar door, and taste the same thing.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of wineries that are, well, certainly have been hip to it for a long time. Like Clearview, I think they do like 30 wines, and they do so much to their tasting room. And Matt's continued that with making some really interesting stuff and trying this. And they're obviously going to do 3 or 4 different Chardonnays, but we got 2 barrels of Malbec, and we got this and that, and But I also see it in a winery like Ash Ridge, who are trying to do, they sort of have their. They're not a big production, but they have their red blend, and they have their Chardonnay, and they have some staples, Hawke's Bay staples. They're really trying to do some interesting stuff too, because they see the value in that. And I just saw they released their individual Syrah clone wines, Doppio, I think it's called, which I thought was a pretty cool idea. Like, that'll all be sold to their wine club or their people, and that pass through. There might be a little bit left every year, but I doubt it. With I think it's only a barrel or 2 each. It's kind of interesting, but I think it was Milton. We did an orange wine tasting up with Hayden, and he said. He was like, I'm just so curious about this, because they did a family of 12 meeting, and like 10 of the winery, they always bring wines to taste this. And he said 10 of the wineries showed up with skin fermented wines, like in 1 year, And he's like, what the hell's going on here? And it was just because, whether or not they were going to commercially release them or anything, it was just like, they want to try it. They want to do something different. And, and some of those, they're all medium-sized wineries to big wineries. I mean, Craggy Range, I don't think of as a tiny winery, They have some big production stuff. So I don't know if they were one of the ones that did it, but I just thought that was pretty interesting, because he was like, wait a second, what's going on here? Everybody is getting, they're starting to see that, you
can challenge a little bit.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool, because you could still do your staples and you still have your go-to wines, but then it just brings such upside to your winery. And your brand, if you will.
Certainly, it's a very different mentality, crushing 10,000 tonnes of Sauvignon Blanc to 60 tonnes of mixed variety within Hawke's Bay. So it can be very challenging in a winery that's doing 10,000 tons of Sauvignon Blanc to actually
live with yourself.
to find the impetus
Yeah.
and to find the little change, or not little change, very big mind shift to then do something quite hands-on and different. Probably not set up for it either in the winery or the marketing department to handle something really different. So it really, for Hawke's Bay, boutique.
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting. I'm just thinking
home of boutique wines, and we should all be doing.
You work for
Interesting.
two productions that are kind of interesting, and at Sacred Hill they have some large production stuff, and then Unison and William Murdoch are like could be completely
Tiny.
different, and we've talked about how tough it can be for a big company to pivot and shift and just say, whoa, this is something we want to try and to make an impact because of the numbers and everything is just big.
Complexities.
Yeah, there's complexity.
It's very hard to go simplicity when you have a lot of complexity.
So, yeah, it must be interesting on a daily basis. You must deal with.
It's challenging, and it's probably one of the reasons that I moved into a more hands-on consultancy role. The challenges, the diversity within my working life, the mental shift, as well as everything else that has to go on. It keeps me very alert. At times I think I've got too much.
No.
I'd like to step back a wee bit.
Well, it's funny. I just said you were outside and you were calling me because you didn't realize. I didn't realize I wasn't answering the door, probably because I had my headphones on or something. I thought you would just walk in. But I just looked out the window. I said, oh, Jenny's on the phone. She'd probably be talking to somebody for the next 20 minutes, like normal time when I try to meet up with you. So I didn't think anything of it. And I was I'll just let her finish her call,
No, I think, we talk about wines being diverse. And I love the diversity of wine, but I also love the diversity of
this business.
My job.
Yeah, your job.
And this morning I was doing analysis. If I was working in a big company, I wouldn't be doing analysis. I'd be asking somebody else to do it. Tomorrow I'm going to be racking barrels. In a big company, you sit at a desk.
I can't
yesterday
do it.
I was doing blending. And a lot of paperwork. The diversity keeps it real.
Yeah, sometimes it's nice to sit in front of the computer for a couple hours and regroup on some things and get organized, but I can't do it for much. That's part of the reason why I do this, is because it keeps me talking to different people, and I find it interesting. But even here, working from home mostly now, even if there's no winery work to go be done or go look after, that I have to go out and mow the lawn, or I have to go garden.
I was just driving along here and thinking, I've got to go and prune that Fiano. Be a perfect day for pruning today. Yeah. Oh, God, I can't do it. I've got other things to do. So, Dan, if you need to do some exercise, you can go and prune some Fiano.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man. I haven't done... I definitely put my time in pruning for a while there. I haven't done too much pruning in the last few years.
Pruning on a day like today, and it's
nice.
Of course, you can't see that. It's beautifully sunny, and it's a nice day. It's very good, and it brings you back to where it all starts. So,
yeah, I get that with my rose bushes now, and
yeah.
But I have a feeling there's going to be some pruning and things being done in Martinborough from now on. So I'm getting more and more involved with that vineyard down there, which is pretty exciting. Certainly with the new, we had an intern this year, and we're not going to do it next year. So I'm just going to be down there. I was down for harvest back and forth a bunch this year already, but I think I'll be doing 3-4 day chunks down there and things. Awesome. So it should be pretty good and a nice change because it's been sort of touch and go with the Pinot all these years.
Yeah, to have your hands on the Pinot, your hands in the Pinot is actually really important. So many decisions
it just has to be babied,
Ferment it's plunging your hands in, it's smelling it, it's listening to it. that's ferments are so different.
Well, what's
There's
really
no
good about
recipe.
James's production is it's all 1 ton fermenters.
Yep.
So it's just really like you can be, first of all, you have to be, but you can really treat everything so specific and keep a really close eye on things. There's not just like one big ferment and a couple small ones. Everything's these tiny ferments. So not tiny, but one ton for Pinot is really nice.
It's nice.
It's
very
really
nice.
good. And a little easier to plunge as well.
Delightful to
Yeah,
plunge.
especially when
in
there's
fact, one of the dangers is over plunging
Yeah.
because it is so easy. So it's having the courage not
a gentle
to
hand.
very gentle. At Sacred Hill, we have lady plungers versus men plungers. So at certain times in the ferment, we need a lady plunge.
A lady plunge, yeah.
You just need to be gentle,
Yeah.
not beaten around.
Yeah, we have a little bit like that at Paratua where we do just a little rumble.
Little rumble.
Little rumble.
Just a gentle tickle.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fine with Pinot. You just have to, talk about something else that's totally different, is you have to just baby the whole time, and then all the way, and then get it in the bottle, and then you have to wait a year. It's just frustrating, but it's amazing,
But that's, I think that's the beauty of these. It can be any size production. It's just knowing your wines. You've got to be intimately involved. Vineyard, ferment, barrels. It's a total involvement in wines, and in the life of your wine. It changes, and then when you make decisions, they're not a spot decision based on how the wine's tasting on a specific day. If you've followed it from the vineyard through the fermenting vat, continually following it during its aging, you know the wines. They're a little bit like children. You've brought them up, you know you've done everything right, and they go off the rails.
Give them a chance.
You just say, that's all right, that's part of their development. They'll come right, they'll be fine, because we know these children, they will be fine. We'll allow, it's that allowing them to develop, but having done the work earlier on. It's the same with wines. You know them. You're intimately involved with them.
Yeah,
You're like children.
One of the things I definitely learned from you, I just spoke with Richard Painter like a week ago, which we'll be releasing this week. One of the things I learned from him was, like, if a tank's exploding, don't panic. You're going to make it work. That was the first time I had seen, like, one of my sort of first real vintage when I worked with him, but which is so important, like, oh, this tank's just spilling wine everywhere. What are we going to do? Okay, let's not panic and let's do which I'm sure you have that same attitude, but in a sort of different light was more when I was sort of early days of Decibel, and then working on some of the Unison stuff with you was, we'd taste something and you'd go, let's see what that looks like tomorrow. Like, let's not make any rash decisions here.
Exactly.
We don't need to add this or do this yet. Like,
Stand
just
back.
Yeah.
Just maybe it's not the best. Look, it's a minefield. If you think about tasting, it's so subjective. When we're working in a winery, we try to make our tasting as objective as possible, because we need to be able to draw conclusions, make decisions. However, you've got to be extremely honest with yourself for a start off. Feeling a bit under the weather. I haven't actually got a sore throat, but there's something tickling in there. Well, actually, maybe my taste buds aren't as good as they should be. I've just cleaned my teeth.
Yeah.
Well, okay, don't judge the wine because you've got a lot of chemicals in your mouth.
That's where your, was it hazelnuts? Pine nuts come in.
Pine nuts.
Your pine nuts.
Clear the palate.
Yeah.
So there's just the physical stuff about you, what's the aromas in the room? My sensory perception aromatically has had to adapt to a background smell, but has that deadened all the other aromas in the wine? What's the temperature of the wine? I'm tasting a red wine and it's only at 10 degrees because it's at cellar temperature. The tannins are going to be far more aggressive than if I tasted it at 20 degrees. So if we're trying to make an objective decision or an objective tasting, which is very subjective, we have to be extremely aware of our own palate and how we taste so we can be objective. I still believe the best tool that a winery has is the winemaker's palate.
Yeah.
It's not the spectro in the lab. We love to have scientific evidence that backs up our palate, but in the end, I can look at a lab result and say,
Yeah, but
there's a mistake there because that doesn't taste like that. Could we redo the lab result?
yeah.
So
Also,
looking
tasting
after
with,
your palate.
with other people too. As
tasting
well.
with other people. Everybody has
That's one
a
thing
different palate.
you've always done too. Is might be first year intern. Come over here, taste this. What do you think? You know. And Jason's really good at that too. Is like he gets nothing's decided unilaterally. You know, it's we all talk and discuss. You know, eventually it's his decision or your decision or my decision.
But when you're tasting with somebody who's got a good consistency in their palate, it can be somebody quite new to wine, but the consistency of their palate, which you can pick up once you taste with them a wee bit.
Yeah.
You become very attuned and their input becomes extremely valuable because everybody's palate is a little bit different. And so when somebody will have high points where they can pick up something that you can't pick up, and therefore when they say, oh, I'm seeing this, you go, oh, hold on, better taste again, better reassess. Okay, now I've got a better understanding of that wine. My decision will be made a little bit like this.
Yeah, I think we're all going to like different stuff as well.
We do.
You know, but it's just, probably come to some sort of agreement. The one thing I was just thinking about when you said, or we were talking about going back the next day, I was just working on a little class with a guy who's a somm at Del Frisco's in Philadelphia, and he just sat for one of his somm exams, and I was just thinking, God, that must be really, really tough.
Oh yes,
because it's one day. You know, we even if we're in the middle and we have decisions to make, you could be like, maybe not today is the best day to taste, or let's go back and visit. Like they have to nail it.
Yeah.
Like that.
And, well, I guess it's a bit like a musician for somebody like a somm who's going for an exam like that. A musician may have to look after their fingers because they're a pianist, or he's got to look after his palate.
Totally, you got to be like ready and in the mindset, and and then forget about the written exam. Like, that's a whole nother thing. But that pressure of which I've done. I've sat for some exams and things, and the best you can do is just relax and just trust your gut. And try not to get
and
get
don't
lost.
Clean your teeth with toothpaste before you go to your tasting exam.
Don't eat a peanut butter sandwich right before you go in. Oh man, that's. But it's. I think that's why they're so valued too, and I love going on sales trips and talking to these people is because you get sometimes a lot of times it gives you confidence in your wine too, because I get this and that, and then a lot of times it's have you tasted these wines? I just was with a guy in Auckland a Mexican som, by the way, in
Yay.
Auckland, and he was telling me about, because I poured him some of my Malbec, about a Malbec from Argentina that I had to try called Animal Malbec.
Wow.
So he introduced me to the importer, and I got some sent down here. And I was actually talking to Gordon and Lauren from Ash Ridge about doing a little Malbec mini symposium, mini day.
Well, now there's, because Clearview are doing a Malbec.
Yeah, Matt, we could get involved.
Yes.
Who else is doing it? And
Straight Malbec.
yeah, I mean, that was part of what I wanted to do, is people are doing it every year. And Gordon's got stuff going back for years. And not always, a lot of times, he's certainly, he's been doing a Malbec dominant,
Yes.
like top wine in New Zealand now for 20 years at least. And so, and he deals with the varietal, both in the gravels and
Yes.
up at Esk. But it's an interesting varietal. It's I don't know if I always found it interesting, and sometimes, and then there's a lot of people who say, oh, it's not, the true. So there's some stuffy people who say it's not a true Bordeaux, and I don't really care about any of that.
No.
I just find it to be a lot like Syrah, and then it's acid driven. And I found that the 16 higher end one
Yeah.
that we did is really reminding me of sort of southern France. These wines that have great acid, but still ripe, dark fruit,
Yes.
but they're not heavy at all. And but there's so many different.
Well, you went to Cahors, didn't you? Did you go to Cahors?
No, I was almost going to go, and then
Because, of course, that's really the home
Yeah.
of Malbec. And those are black wines, the black wines.
I've had a lot of them.
Cahors.
Yeah, I go reach for them a lot now. So we're going to try to get that together and do, even if we just do it here at the house one day, and maybe
Bring your Malbecs.
Bring your Malbecs. I would like to, maybe involve not just winemakers, but a few people who appreciate, your sort of Jeff Kellys and guys like that who would maybe bring a wine, but also just give some feedback that not just have a bunch of winemakers in the room, but people, some good trusted consumers as well.
Exactly. Well, this is the most consumers that are the best people, because after all, without them, we wouldn't be here.
That's right.
So what we're trying to do is make something for them to enjoy.
That's right.
And that's, enjoyment is really important. It's just like a happy kitchen produces happy food. Enjoying making wine is part of making happy wines for people to enjoy.
You can feel it all through the wine, the brands, all that. You kind of feel like
is really important.
Yeah, I think that's again one of the things I like about going out and talking about the wines and selling them is I get excited for people to try them and get the feedback. It's funny because another thing about Gordon, he said when I talked to him was very similar to what you just said. He goes, I've gone all through these tasting descriptors for the last 40 years or whatever. And he goes, I just come back to one, delicious. Is it delicious, And is the wine enjoyable, is what,
And
who cares
in
what it
the
is?
end, we're drinking it for enjoyment,
Yeah.
for pleasure.
Yeah.
So probably I think I say to most people in tasting classes, do you like it? That's number one. Do you like it? And then we will have a little delve into why you like it.
Or why not. Yeah.
Or why not.
Yeah. Cool. I think we'll leave it there, Jenny.
Good.
I think we'll probably sit down again soon. Well, maybe in a year's time or something. Give me some time. I'm sure we can come up with more and more subjects. But thanks for stopping by. I know your schedule's real busy.
Absolute pleasure.
Cheers. Right. Thank you, Jenny. She's the best. Too easy to talk to. That's not even fair. I'd like to say I don't know, she did all the work, but it's not like I get paid to do this thing. But Man, that is easy when you have somebody like that in the chat. I find my curiosity gets heightened whenever I speak with Jenny, and maybe that's just something about her that brings it out in her peers and certainly younger winemakers. I hope you guys appreciate that and can feel, I mean, you're talking to somebody who's been in the industry for a long, long time. One thing we didn't get into was she started with Steven Spurrier in France at a wine school and started in education, and has become one of the world's most renowned winemakers. I mentioned in that interview that the annual vintage selection of the Giblet Gravel is like half the wines she's had a hand in, and for her to be educating some people from China and another language, and she's just finding the love and finding she gets as much out of it as they do. Just sort of shows you what kind of person she is. So thanks again, and check us out on Facebook, Decibel Wines, Instagram, and Twitter at Decibel Dan. Give us a follow. Check in. Got some big trips coming up. Heading to Christchurch for the first time next week. I hope to meet some people down there. And then after that, I will be going to Australia for the first time. So who knows? Maybe I'll sneak in a podcast or two on the travels. But I'm still trying to focus mostly on Hawke's Bay with this thing. So more to come on that. I actually don't even know who's going to be next, but I have a couple ideas. But stay tuned. Cheers.